The opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Eastlink TV, its sponsors, or partners.
Hi, I'm Gloria McCluskey. You're watching Destination Dartmouth. My destination this morning is beautiful Sullivan's Pond, and my guest is David Jones, Dartmouth's historian. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Gloria. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here on this. We hope it's a beautiful day. It's always beautiful here at Sullivan's Pond. Now, David, you're going to tell me and the listeners a lot about the history of Dartmouth. And Dartmouth, as I understand it and as I remember, has a lot of history. So you take it away, David.
Well, Gloria, it's a pleasure to be here at Sullivan's Pond. This is my childhood home. I grew up on Elliott Street most of my life, so this was my playground. And so it's a very comfortable place to talk about our history.
Right.
So Dartmouth has so much to offer, as you've known for years in your contributions to our city. But what I really like, I love stuff that's buried in the archives and old maps, things that are underneath our feet. As an archaeologist, I love to dig up bits of Dartmouth whenever I can.
Yeah, you're an archaeologist. You do the digs also.
Yes, so I studied at St. Mary's University, and whenever I get a chance, I love to come dig over in Dartmouth. And to tell you a little bit about that, last November, I was digging in a backyard above the King Street Fire Station.
Oh.
And there are lots of beautiful properties, as you know, in downtown Dartmouth,
Right.
very old historic houses, but sometimes people don't realize that their tiny, quiet little yards are full of history underneath the ground.
That's for sure.
That's for sure. So we got permission from a landowner above the fire station to go in and check out the property, and we just did 5 little test pits. So when I say that, you're digging 40 by 40 centimeters. And we thought, you know, maybe we'll find a couple old bottles, a clay pipe or two. No. We found a giant stone wall that went the whole length of this little backyard, and we also found probably what was a cellar floor or an old hearth, an old fireplace. So there's more to dig up.
What kind of rock was it, David? What kind of
So
stone?
this was just the natural slate that would have been quarried from the spot, because when you go along King Street or Wentworth in the downtown, you see the cliffs, you see that slate, that natural material.
The one right behind the fire station.
Exactly. So they were using that native material and they were building walls. And when I say walls, we don't know how old they are because we went down about 1 meter deep and we're still into the artifacts of the mid-18th century.
And the walls are still there?
Yeah, still there in perfect shape underneath the ground.
How did they stay together, David?
So they were dry stones, there wasn't any mortar, and they were just well protected. So people started dumping things on them. It looks like at one point, maybe in the late 1800s, early 1900s, people started to use this as their garbage dump. So you'd go to your backyard, you'd throw everything there, it piles up and up, and then it just gets forgotten. It's covered in soil, and that's what preserved it. It'd probably be a different story if it was along the edge of the cliff or on the very edge of the yard. It'd be exposed, it would wear away, but this was perfectly preserved like a time capsule.
So what else have you found in Dartmouth when you're digging?
So Dartmouth, I haven't got to do too much else here, but lots of other archaeological companies are busy here in Dartmouth digging up remnants of the Shubenacadie Canal, looking at the Star manufacturing site. So that's what's going on. But I know from my own research that the sky's the limit. If we get some funding, if there are more people like me that can go out, spend their free time digging up these sites, you can go find anything from Mi'kmaq campsites to old Shubenacadie Canal and Star infrastructure, or also just everyday objects that are in people's yards, whether it's a old house or a foundation that could be just in your garden.
Have you ever gone up to Nivens Avenue? Nivens Avenue was the site of some of the settlements, I think, of the native people.
Yes, the Tufts Cove area and the Turtle Grove area of Dartmouth is so historic, and there's a beautiful old Tufts Cove cemetery in that area that's lovingly restored
off India Road.
Yes, by a local volunteer, and so that area is really historic, and some archaeologists have looked around there, but I think there's definitely more to do, especially to tell the story of the Mi'kmaq people of Dartmouth.
And we also have, of course, on Gary Street, the cemetery.
The old burial ground, yes.
The Mi'kmaq people.
So that's a very historic area of Dartmouth that many people drive by every day.
Don't even know.
Olney Drive, and that's exactly right. And John Martin, my great-great-uncle, he said the same thing in his beautiful book, The Story of Dartmouth.
Yes,
he said
I
all the
have that
people
book.
that walk along here have no idea. And he would show visitors, taking them on the ferry or walking around Dartmouth, all this history. And starting in the 1830s, it was a Catholic burial ground, and there was a large Mi'kmaq population that were Catholic in Dartmouth and that went to St. Peter's Church. And John Martin writes that the hymn books at St. Peter's, they were written in English, Latin, and Mi'kmaq,
Were they?
which was quite beautiful.
And
So there were Mi'kmaq people buried there, and some people
I wonder if there's any of those hymn books in the museum.
I don't know. That's a good place to look, Gloria.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why you're going to do a show there.
Right, yeah.
And show us all the artifacts in our
Yeah,
warehouse.
Yeah.
So some of those things could exist, and they may also be at St. Peter's Church.
I know one day I had the chief and some other people visit my office when I was mayor. They were very upset that in the Gary Street property, the city was up there digging, looking for more grave sites, and they were very concerned that there were also burials there, and they didn't want them burying somebody on top of
their
somebody.
ancestors.
Yeah,
And that's a major concern, and that's something that has to be worked out with the Mi'kmaq people to have a collaborative process. But
Yeah.
there are methods, Gloria, that we can use, like archaeological geophysics. That's taking what I call a big orange boom box
Yeah.
and walking that over the ground, and it can map out differences in the soil, and you can identify graves. You can identify all kinds of things. Gloria, I knew this would happen. You're so popular in Dartmouth. People walk by and they wave to you. It's beautiful.
I'm history. It's
I won't
good.
be digging you
It's
up anytime soon.
It's good we're here doing this historic thing because, David, we're going to break in a minute, and when we come back, I'm going to talk to you about what you feel is the most historic part of the city of Dartmouth. You know, we annexed a lot of the areas. I think it was 1962. So the old part of the city, you know, we annexed Port Wallace and Westfall and Tufts Cove and Woodside.
Yeah.
And they all became part of Dartmouth, but prior to that, the old area. So we're going to be taking a break now, but I'll be back shortly with my guest, David Jones, on Destination Dartmouth. Hi, I'm back, Destination Dartmouth, here at beautiful Sullivan's Pond with my guest, David Jones. David, we're going to talk about star manufacturing.
Oh, this is my comfort zone, Gloria. This is what I love to talk about. So
Yeah.
Star Manufacturing, we're not far away from the location of the site, as you know, on Prince Albert Road by the start of Pleasant Street. And Star Manufacturing is one of the most important factories in the history of Canada, and is right up there in the world for its contribution to skating and hockey.
And people in Dartmouth, so many don't even know that.
That's right. People drive by every day the site, and that's a real theme in Dartmouth, whether you're driving by the Gary Street Cemetery,
Right.
or you're driving by Sullivan's Pond and you don't know what the pillars are, you think it's a bridge, actually it was canal markers.
Yes.
So the Star site, in the early 1800s, Star Manufacturing started as a nail factory, so in the 1850s, 1860s, and they started making skates. And I've brought you an example of these skates,
Let's
Gloria.
see that skate.
So here's one of the Acme Spring skates made by Star Manufacturing, and these were revolutionary because before this you would have the old-time skates that were made on wooden blocks, and they would break all the time. They would never connect to your boot properly.
No.
You would have to use a little tool called a gimlet, drill a hole in the bottom of your boot, and it would ruin it. People would break their ankles, they would damage their boots, break their skates. It was terrible. So John Forbes from Dartmouth, he was an inventor, a very innovative person, and he invented this type of skate called the Acme skate, and these were sold all over the world, and Star Manufacturing made millions of pairs of skates from the 1860s to 1939. So these would clamp onto your boot. They were perfect.
Just show me, David.
We'll
how
show
it
you.
works.
It's a little rusty. This is an
Yeah.
oldie, but if we fidget with it, here we go. So you would take this mechanism and you would pull it over, and then this would be ready to attach to the heel and the toe of your boot. And then when you had it in place, you would put it back together, and that would snap shut and would lock on perfectly. Also, they'd come with a little wrench, and you could
if your
fasten.
foot was wider,
if your foot was a different shape, different size, you could fasten it perfectly. And if you look at photographs of the time from the 1870s into the early 1900s, everyone was wearing star skates. This was a worldwide
in the
phenomenon.
world.
Yes, and that was made in this beautiful factory in downtown
And
Dartmouth.
I believe that was a size 10.
It was made just for you, Gloria.
For me, because I wear size 10.
So, talking about the Star Factory, something that upset so many historically minded people in Dartmouth was seeing the Star plant torn down in about the year 2000. When I was a little boy, I wrote a letter to HRM and I said, I just went to the Star site with my dad. I looked in the window and it was so beautiful. Could you please save this? And they didn't listen to my letter.
Gordon Stanfield owned it at the end.
Near the end, but then at the time I was peering in the window, it was owned by the city, but it was torn down and broke my heart. It would have been a perfect place as a new home of the Dartmouth Heritage Museum, a farmer's market.
We did things like that. There was a beautiful stone house on North Street. Beautiful, and that got demolished. You know, what a piece of history.
And as you know, and being a promoter of Dartmouth and wanting people to come and experience this community, people come for history. They don't come to see empty parking lots or modern generic buildings.
Apartments.
You want to see something that gives a community its character, and that's what we're tearing down.
And David, the history of that site, not only because of the Star,
but also its connections to the Shubenacadie Canal.
Yeah.
And so Star used the water power of the defunct Shubenacadie Canal system, and that's also home to the Sawmill River, which we also have to acknowledge was a waterway, and not just a waterway, a homeland for the Mi'kmaq
I remember
people.
that water running through there, David.
My grandmother, Marie Jones, a close friend of yours, she told me when she was a little girl, this is a little different. She would dress up when she was 10 years old. She would put on high heels and she'd take her baby stroller with her little doll, and she told me it was an event for her to walk down to the canal and see the water running.
The water, and you know, if I just close my eyes, I can still hear it trickling down there. It was a wonderful sound.
And John Martin in The Story of Dartmouth wrote, how lucky are we as a community to have this waterway that goes through the heart of the downtown.
Yeah.
And instead, you know, we put it underground. It's a big movement today to daylight the Sawmill River and get people to experience it and enjoy the beautiful resource.
And to bring back the flume house.
And that is one element, but you know, I'm very much a Star person, and so I think what's missing at the Star site is something commemorating Star manufacturing.
Oh, yes.
And that's a
There
story.
should be, down in Sydney, they have a great big violin for some reason.
We should have
there should be a big
giant
skate.
Star skate, just
there should
like
be a big
this.
skate there, too.
In the same way we have a beautiful canoe that's by Sonobe
Yes.
on Prince Albert Road, I think you could make it the exact same way, having this beautiful Star skate.
Yeah.
So people can always remember, and you can see right away why this site is so important.
Yeah, and I wonder around the world how many of those skates are still remaining.
Well,
Have you
just
ever-
in Nova Scotia, when you travel around and you look in antique shops, they're everywhere.
Are
And
they?
you can see them. What's really neat, these were used on Arctic expeditions. They were taken to Antarctica. When you see huts of old explorers, you can see these on the shelf. So Star skates traveled all around the world.
Now, when I do my show, I'm doing a show with the museum, and we're going up to the warehouse.
Yeah.
And I know there are different skates that Star made, not only the ones.
Skates of all different sizes,
Yeah.
of types, and for different purposes. There were
Yeah.
skates for speed skating, for hockey,
Right.
for figure skating. And there's a young employee of the Dartmouth Heritage Museum named Shannon, and she is a curatorial assistant, and she's been working nonstop on the Star skate collection, cataloging them, making sure everything's in order, and learning about specific stories. Who owned these pairs? What were they used for? So you'll go get to see her hard work
Yeah.
at the museum.
Unfortunately, you know, we're not going to have time to get into all of it.
No.
But I just want a snapshot of what's there. And certainly, David, I think people, when they see this show, it will be telecast in the fall, and to see that skate, they will be really
And as you know,
surprised.
we've walked together in the warehouse,
Yeah.
and a museum of a vibrant community like this shouldn't have their whole collection stored away in a warehouse. It's got to be out there for the people of Dartmouth and the people of the world
to
to come
show
see.
what our history
Yeah,
is.
it shouldn't be
You know,
dusty in a
Joseph
old
Howe's
warehouse.
desk is up there.
All kinds of
You know,
artifacts.
all kinds of artifacts. We're going to wrap up now, but I'll be back with my guest, David Jones, here at beautiful Sullivan's Pond. Hi, I'm back at beautiful Sullivan's Pond, destination Dartmouth, and with my guest, Dartmouth historian, David Jones. Well, David, we're back. I asked you early on in the show what you considered to be the most historical part of Dartmouth. And that's old Dartmouth.
Yeah. So, as we were discussing off camera, there's so many different parts of Dartmouth, and as Dartmouth grew, we took in more surrounding areas. So each area has its own beautiful stories. Sometimes those stories aren't given as much attention, and that's something we need to look into the future. But my home area is downtown Dartmouth, so I gravitate there immediately. So downtown Dartmouth is an area that I'm concerned is being developed quite quickly, so we're starting to lose older parts of the community. And downtown Dartmouth has so many stories, so I was focusing on the most historic area. I would go around the fire station in that part of Dartmouth,
in that
or around
area.
Dartmouth Cove. So that's where we're seeing older buildings, and this isn't just talking about a European perspective. The Mi'kmaq were in this area for thousands of years. So you have the Mi'kmaq story, you have early European Dartmouth settlement, you have some of the oldest surviving houses, and as we discussed earlier, these backyards are action-packed. They look, oh, look, here's my barbecue, here's my my bench, but underneath we have old walls, we have old artifacts, features, and sites, so it's definitely worth a look. And I've been talking for a long time now how downtown Dartmouth should be protected, that those old houses around Wentworth and King Street,
And
up
if
by
you
Church
go up
Street,
Edward Street, there's
Edward
a very
Street.
old house up
yes,
there.
beautiful old houses in that area, and that's what we should be looking for in terms of protecting our history.
So, David, let's take a trip out to the lake now, to where the ice houses were.
So, Gloria, throughout my life, I've always seen you and your family around the Dartmouth lakes, and a little insider information for everyone. I grew up with Gloria's grandchildren, Hannah and Patty, and so I've seen Gloria for years on the lakes, and we have nice chats and we talk about history and talk about paddling. So, the ice houses, for so many older people in Dartmouth, that was such an important part of life. That's
No
how you got your
refrigerators.
refrigeration, your ice. Many people remember their childhood of getting a little block of ice chipped off for them and
I
having it
remember
like a
I
popsicle.
lived up in North End Dartmouth, and the wagon would come around with the horses and the blocks of ice, and a hot day it would be melting, the street would be wet behind them, but and how they harvested the ice out there. How many people, I wonder, were employed there, David?
It employed a great deal of people in Dartmouth, and there were many historic families, and you would look at the ice houses and see the names of the
Right.
owners, like the Chiddicks or
Chiddicks,
the
yeah.
Ottos, and you
Chiddick and
see
Otto,
that
those
all
were the
around
two
Dartmouth.
big names.
And lots of people, if you ask them about what their grandfather did, that would be a common job,
Yeah.
working on the ice. And what's really interesting, you know very well from seeing me out on the ice and Lake Banook skating, and sometimes wondering, David, are you going to fall in? I've spent so much time skating on the Dartmouth lakes. And one time my father, Martin Jones, another
And your
Dartmouth
father
historian,
wrote a book.
Yes, he wrote about Hockey's Home, Dartmouth and Halifax, the origin of Canada's game, all about Dartmouth being the birthplace of hockey. And we can talk about that in a second.
And I believe that.
Oh, and I believe it with all my heart.
You know, Windsor is claiming it, but we've seen older pictures.
Oh, well, you know, talking about that, many other places claim we are the birthplace of hockey, but what's really funny is we have the newspaper records, we have the oral history, we even have artifacts. There are old hockey pucks made of wood that come out of Lake Banook when people go diving there. And a
There's
lot
still
of
hockey pucks in the lake.
down in the lake from the 1830s, isn't that beautiful?
Isn't that fabulous?
So a lot of people say, hey, we started hockey, but what's really funny, the hockey gear for a lot of those games they talk about came from Star Manufacturing.
Yeah, right.
Why did it? We were already playing hockey here.
Sure.
But one time, Dad and I were skating on the lake, and we saw scientists out with a canoe on the ice in the middle of the winter, and we said, what are you doing? They said, we're drilling down below the ice to get samples from the bottom of the lake. And they told us that when they do their research to look at core samples, to look at the environment from thousands of years ago, they find a big, thick layer of sawdust. And the sawdust, was used to insulate the ice.
Yes.
And every year it would be cleared out and would be thrown out into the lake. So that's filling up Lake Winnock down below.
Isn't that something? And of course, when did paddling first start on the lake?
Well, the oldest recorded regatta in the Dartmouth area was in 1826 on the harbor, but
yeah, they
the
used to
Mi'kmaq
paddle
people have been paddling here for thousands of years
Oh,
using
yeah.
what today is the Shubenacadie Canal system, but very much in the late 1800s and early 1900s, regattas were being formalized on the lake, and there's a great tradition, and Winnock dates back to 1903, so people have been racing here for a very long time. There's a wonderful tradition that your family, Gloria, has been so much
Yeah.
a part of, and it's just a
Yeah,
beautiful
that's
thing.
one of our legacies.
Definitely.
Our great paddlers. We've had some.
Dartmouth has sent our paddlers all around the world to the
and
Olympics,
our
World
paddling
Championships.
course is one of the best in the
Oh,
world.
it's just beautiful.
And it's natural. It's all
Yes.
natural.
And on that note, funny story that I have growing up on the lakes. The last World Championships in 2009, I was out dragon boating in Lake Micmac, and a paddler from Belarus, I overheard him kayaking, and he said, isn't it beautiful that this community has bulldozed us a second training course so that we can do our race and we can go train. I thought to myself, my goodness, this has been here for thousands of years, but that shows you we're so lucky. We didn't have to make it out of
If you went to Regina, where they spent, I forget how many million now building a lake.
Or
Lake
the Olympic
Lasogna,
Basin in
yeah.
Montreal, as fun as that is, it's just not the same.
No.
Paddling around concrete or paddling in
No,
this beautiful community.
This is so natural and so beautiful. Well, David, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our discussion on the history of Dartmouth, and I know there is so much more history that we haven't even touched. And you will in digs, I'm sure, find a lot of information and hopefully the residents of Dartmouth and everywhere in Nova Scotia will get to learn more about it. So until then, I want to thank you again, David, very much for coming here on your day off and tell us just a little bit. We just touched the surface of the history of Dartmouth.
Thanks so much, Gloria.
So thanks again. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time on Destination Dartmouth when I will bring you some more stories about Dartmouth.